So, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining the NAMC Institute of Zoroastrian Studies discussion group event today. The North American Morbits Council is a not-for-profit organization dedicated to serving the religious and spiritual needs of the North American community in North America. The NAMC Institute of Zoroastrian Studies is the educational arm of the NAMC with the objective to train Morbits and impart knowledge of Zoroastrianism to fellow Zoroastrians and to the broader community. So, and the NAMC Institute of Zoroastrian Studies facilitates this event to promote knowledge through free but respectful discussion and debate. The views and opinions expressed during the talk are those of the participant and the presenter and do not reflect the official policy or position of the North American Morbits Council. So during the presentation, we encourage you to participate, ask questions, engage in discussion, and share your views on the topic. The easiest way, of course, is to use the hand emoji and post a question in chat feature. So following a brief talk by the presenter, we will open the floor for discussion. And also, I just want you to note that the event will be recorded and published on various platforms. And now the presenter. Presenter is Faribos Ranaman. He is very well known and he has published several books and articles. He has presented on several occasions on this platform and others as well. So with that, I will hand it over to Faribos.
Thank you, Tempton and NAMC. Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow seekers of truth. Today I stand before you to speak of a tragedy that time has buried, but memory must never forget. It is the story of a people, the Zarathushtis, who faced centuries of persecution, yet carried their light across the darkness of history, a tragedy we do not speak of to be politically correct. It will take me more time than is available today to mention all the atrocities. Therefore, allow me to summarize them. Let me first introduce the culture that destroyed the Zarathushti way of life. Muawiyah became the fifth Caliph of Islam. His family, once bitter enemies of Prophet Muhammad, fought against his tribe. The Arab women usually accompanied the men into battle. In the Battle of Uhud, when Muhammad's uncle was killed, Muawiyah's mother, Hind, went over to the body, split him open, and took a bite of his liver, a traditional act of revenge. In Iran, she is remembered as Hind the Jigar Khar, Hind the liver eater. It is not a legend, it is history, recorded by Tabari in volume 15, page 152. It offers a glimpse into the mindset, the culture, and the cruelty that the Iranians, our ancestors, would face in the centuries that followed. Let us explore the divine validation of these acts. The Quran, Surah 9, verse 29 states, and I quote, "Fight those who believe not in Allah, nor the last day, nor hold as forbidden that which has been forbidden by Allah and His apostle, even if they are people of the book." Therefore, it's not a question about being radical or liberal, but it's about being a follower or a non-follower of the religion of Allah. Let us look how their children were trained. Again, Tabari tells us on page 2341, and I quote, "In the battle of Qadisiyah, the Arab children went among the dead with vessels of water. They gave water to the wounded Muslims in whom there was a breath of life, and they killed the wounded Persians in whom there was a breath of life. They came down from the battlefield at the time of the evening prayers, unquote. So they were pious kids. They were doing it for God. When the Persian Empire fell, the unarmed men were slain. The women and children were captured and sold in the slave markets of Mecca and Medina. Again, it is Tabari, page 2422 and 2632, exactly as required by the Quran. From that point forward, the history of the Zarathushtis became a history of genocide, of extermination, of a miraculous survival of a culture, a language, a faith. They held fast to their tradition, language, and culture, believing that someday the truth would rise again in the hearts of the Iranians. And today, we see that reawakening in Iran, a return of the youth to their ancestral roots, to a culture founded not on blind obedience, but on wisdom, mazda, kherad, the word that appears more than any other word in the Gatha 164 times. The world remembers the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews were murdered. The Armenians honor their 600,000 murdered in Turkey. But what of the Zartushtis? Once the majority in the Great Persian Empire, a civilization that held 40% of the world's population, they were all wiped out. But for the last 80,000, maybe. When Manik Tilimji Hataria counted them in 1854, there were only 7,711 Zartushtis left in Iran and fewer than 70,000 refugees in India. Even today, many within the community, Zoroastrian community, hesitate to speak of this genocide. But non-Zoroastrian Iranians are beginning to do so. A search on TikTok and Instagram will surprise you. Let's turn to Balkhi's book, Parsname. He writes, when the people of Taliban in Khorasan revolted and killed the governor, the Caliph Abdullah bin Amir ordered that Iranians be hanged on both sides of the roads for 4 farsang. 4 farsang is 24 miles. When the people of Istakh and Pars revolted, 40,000 men were slaughtered and their blood was used to run the water mills. Biruni, in his book Ansar al-Baghiyah, records that they shed so much Iranian blood that it powered the mills to grind the flour enough to feed the Arab army. In another revolt, so many were beheaded that the blood grew thick and water had to be poured over it to make it flow again. Biruni also writes of Khotaybe, who ordered the execution of all scholars in Khorazm and burned their books. Burning the scholars in the pyre of their own writings was a common punishment. In the city of Qom, 70 leading citizens were beheaded in a single day. Such incidents are reported in abundance. Yet the Iranian spirit would not die. The people of Tabaristan, Gilan, Delaman, along the Caspian Sea resisted the invaders for centuries. The Arabs would never conquer them. Only later, under the Safavid dynasty in 1587 CE, were they forcefully converted to Shia Islam. By 697 CE, Arabic had become the official language of Iran. Those caught speaking Persian were hanged by the tongue or their tongues cut out. There's a story of one poet in Baghdad who praised the Khalifa in Persian. He was rewarded with 100 gold coins and then had his tongue cut out for having recited the beautiful poem in Persian. The resistance continued for generations. Heroes arose, such as the Bezadans, sons of Vandad Hormuz, known as Abu Muslim Khorasani. Babak Khorramdin, who fought the Arabs for 21 years. Yaqub al-Lays, a descendant of Garshas, who led a revolt 240 years after the invasion. He was the inspiration for Ferdowsi to save the language. And the Samanians, who traced their lineage to Bahram Chubin, and many others like Biafarid, Ustad Sis, Al-Mughannane, Sanpad, Al-Isfahani, and Maziyar, to name a few. When the people of Pars and Kerman revolted and refused to pay the infidel tax, the Jazir, the Arab governor, fled. Ali ibn Abu Talib, today worshipped by Iranians, sent his army under General Ziyad with a vast army to crush the rebellion and collect the tax. Such was the price of faith in those days. One secretly celebrated freedom fighter over the centuries is Firuz al-Nahawandi. Firuz was enslaved and sold to an Arab in Medina. He was a carpenter, a stonemason, and a blacksmith, and was famous for building windmills. One day in the marketplace of Medina, he meets Omar, the Khalifa of Islam. He complains to Omar that his owner took a high percentage of his earning. Omar asked him what his skills were, and when he heard of his versatile abilities, he said, "You earn enough, despite the tax." Then he asked Firuz if he would build him a windmill. Firuz replied, "If you survive, I will certainly make you a mill that will be the talk of everyone in both East and the West." Omar later thought that this was a threat, but he forgot about it. One day, while Omar was leading a prayer in the mosque, Firuz slipped in with a two-edged dagger under his dress and killed Omar and two others behind him and fled. There are conflicting reports of whether Firuz was killed or he fled and went to Iran. But in Kashan, there is a shrine of Shojauddin Abu Lulu Firuz, and people pray in his memory. It is there even today. Firuz had bought an Iranian child in the slave markets of Medina and named her Morwarid, pearl, Lulu in Arabic. And that is why his name was Abu Lulu Firuz. Firuz, the father of Morwarid, Lulu. The day after he killed Omar, Omar's son went on a rampage and killed Morwarid and two of Firuz's slave companions. News of the murder of the Khalifa Omar by Firuz reached Iran in late winter and spread everywhere, causing great joy before Nowruz of the year 24 of the Hijri calendar, solar calendar. It was the only good news after 8 years of oppression, cruelty, and crime of the Arabs in Iran. But there was a big problem for the national happiness of the Iranian people. If the people were openly happy about Omar's death, they would definitely be killed by the Arab rulers. So they had to hide their happiness in some way. Combining the joy of the people from the murder of Omar by Firuz and the need to hide the joy, the fascinating character of Haji Firuz was created by the Iranians. They painted their face black, wore a red robe, and danced in the streets welcoming Nowruz with the famous song still sung today. ارباب ارباب خودم بز بز قندی ارباب خودم چرا نمیخندی. It's translated as, my lord the goat, the sugar goat, my lord, why don't you laugh. The goat is a reference to the Arabs because they shaved their mustache and had the beard. They look like goat. And why don't you laugh, my lord, was because they had already killed Omar and he could no longer laugh. This song is sung even today in the markets during Nowruz. The black face and the red robe were colors of resistance, representing the two types of freedom fighters: red, the aggressive type, and black, the subtle type. For 200 years, the Arabs terrorized this ancient civilized world. Persia, Egypt, Assyria, Armenia, Lydia, and Palestine. They imposed Islam and Arabic tongue by the sword. They burned the libraries, destroyed manuscripts, and replaced centuries of science and philosophy with a single book, the Quran. The people who had once calculated the natural meridian, mapped the stars, and measured the depth of oceans were told that all knowledge was heresy. A lunar calendar replaced the perfect solar calendar. Their medicine and astronomy were replaced by prayers. And yet today, we are told by Western scholars that Islam gave rise to Renaissance in Europe. And those Iranian scholars are labeled as Islamic scholars. The reality is different. Most scholars of those periods have their place of birth as part of the name. Most of them were from areas in Khorasan. Khorasan at that time was big. It was Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, parts of Iran, and Afghanistan. Khorasan was conquered 17 years after Qadisiyah. They had heard what the invaders would do, so they hid their manuscripts. About 150 years later, when the Iranian dynasties like the Barmakis and the Samanians regained control, they unearthed their treasures, only to find manuscripts they could no longer read. They sought out Zoroastrians who had preserved the language. Among them was Bahmanyar Marzban, who taught philosophy, mathematics, and astronomy to Omar Khayyam and gave him the ancient Mazdiyasni solar calendar, which needs no correction for 110,000 years. The only perfect calendar known today, also mentioned in the Bundaish. To preserve it, Khayyam dedicated it to King Jalaluddin, and it became the Jalali calendar, which is used today in Iran. Abu Ali Sina, Ibn Sina, lived only 57 years, but wrote 450 reference books on philosophy, medicine, astronomy, chemistry, physics, music, even recipes still used today. They call him an Islamic scholar, but the truth is, he was the voice of the hidden Iranian treasure. Most scholars of the period were polymaths. depending on the type of manuscripts their families had preserved. Most of the science was based on generations of observation and experiments, not a work of one person or one generation. You have to experiment to know that the medicine works. Or if you are watching the stars, you have to watch for a long period to make sure what you're going to write about it. So each of the scholars wrote on different subjects, and all the matter that they presented were vast. For centuries, the genocide continued. When the Mughal Emperor Temur-e-Lang or Tamerlane invaded Iran, his son, the governor of Shiraz, was killed by a mountain tribe. Today, the location in Iran is known as Kokiluye wa Bohir Ahmad. Temur marched to punish them. At the narrow pass, his army was showered by arrows from every leaf of every tree. He retreated, but returned with gunpowder from China. He blasted through the mountains and found that most warriors had something tied to the back. He killed one of them and found they were women, mothers, carrying their children on their back as they fought. He found a fire temple deep in the mountains, tended by two old priests, and realized that he had been fighting the last of the Zarathushtis. Up to the time of the Safavids, around 1587 CE, over 4 million Zarathushtis still lived in Iran. The Safavids embraced Shiaism and made it the state religion. Their armies marched to the last stronghold of the Zoroastrian dynasty, the Padus-Panians, in the Caspian region, and forced them to convert to Islam. Those who survived fled into the deserts of Yazd and Kerman. There they established small villages, each preserving their unique identity and even accent. They became the 7,711 souls left of the 44% of the world population, later counted and saved by Manikji Limji Hataria. Those 7,711 were banned from riding even on a donkey, and if found literate, it was a crime. Zarathushtis could not go out on a rainy day, lest they pollute the streams and the rivers. Their houses had to be lower than a Muslim's house and have only one door. They were forbidden to touch food in the market, and their farm products were not allowed to be sold. Manikji laid the foundation of change. Manikji is Amordad in Iran. May his memory live forever. Before I conclude, I would like to tell you of one woman, Golestan Banu, the real savior of the Zarathushtis of Iran. The ancestors of her father, Khosrow Yazdiyar, were among those who had fled to the deserts of Kerman. In 1779, during the turmoil after the death of Karim Khan Zan, he fled to Yazd. There he married and had a daughter, Golestan. Her beauty drew the attention of the local Muslims, who declared it a sin for such a beautiful maiden to remain a Zarathushti. In 1796, her father once more, this time to save Golestan, fled to Bombay, where they found refuge with Adilji Dorabji Lashkari. Golestan later married Faramji Bikhaji Pandey. Her husband's family had once sheltered another refugee girl, Firuze, whose parents had been forcefully converted to Islam, and they did not want the same fate for their daughter. A German traveler smuggled her to Bombay, where she was given refuge by the Pandays and later married Rustamji Dorabji, the soldier who defended Bombay for the British in 1692. Golestan and Faramji had 9 children, 5 sons and 4 daughters. Her daughter Shekar Banu was married to Sir Dinsha Pitit. Her elder son Barjorji created a fund in 1834 to aid the Iranian refugees in Bombay. Her third son Merwanji created a second fund in 1854, the Emulation Society, known in Iran as Anjuman-e Akaber Parsiyan, the Society of Persian Nobles. It was this society that sent Manikji Limji Hataria to Iran on March 31st, 1854, with the mission to investigate and report on the condition of the Zarathushtis. And because of this mission, because of one woman's dedication and compassion, the light of Zarathustra survived in Iran. Her descendants are among us today in North America. Roshan Rivetna and her family. Is Roshan there? A living proof that the fire has not gone out. These are real cases. We are not talking of legends. We are talking of real people and real history. Friends, the story of the Zarathustra is not merely a story of suffering. It is a story of endurance, a story of faith, of wisdom, and of the human will to survive when all the forces of darkness arise against it. Let us remember, let us speak the truth, not in bitterness, but in clarity. For silence is complicity, and remembrance is justice. Tell the story so history does not repeat itself. May the world one day recognize the forgotten genocide, and may the light of wisdom, Mazda, forever shine upon the children of Zarathustra. You can read in more detail about the genocide and the ethnic cleansing on my website, ancientiran.com. I will not do justice if I don't mention the cultural genocide led by Alexander. It changed both Zoroastrianism and the world. When Alexander attacked the Persian Empire, he was guided by his tutor Aristotle, who said, "If we destroy the Persian, we will rule the world." He did that, and today the world follows Greek culture and even Greek gods. In school, we were taught that there are 5 continents and they are represented on the Olympic flag by 5 circles. We are also told that we have 5 senses, as Aristotle determined. In the Avesta, we read of Haf Keshwar Zamin, 7 continents. And the Gatha tells us to use all 10 senses with wisdom. Ha 44.18. As reported, the Romans took a copy of the Royal Avesta, which is today more rumored to be in the Vatican vaults, the successors of the Holy Roman Empire. Alexander refurbished Babylonian temples and encouraged Mithraism among the Parthians. After 500 years, the last Parthian king Ardavan started to collect the scattered Avesta, which was completed by the Sasanians, later destroyed by the Arabs. When the British arrived in India, they encountered Zoroastrians, and when the news spread, the Vatican sent scholars to determine whether they had any ancient manuscripts. The first was Duperreau, a French soldier who was allowed to cross into British territory while the two countries were at war. Later, they called Avesta a dead language and laid the foundation of mistranslating the Gathas and other texts. I will give you two examples of consequential verses. The first is verse 32.8. We are told that Yamas is Shah Jamshid and his father is Vivan Gusho. We very well know that Tamuris is the father of Jamshid. But for the last 150 years, we have not questioned this. We have repeated it. But Yamas in Sanskrit means controller, ruler, not Jamshid. And Vivan Gusho is sky sound, sound from the sky. What do we call an aeroplane in Hindi? Viman. It is derived from Vivan. In Persian, we still use gush, ear, and we call the telephone gushi. Read the correct translation in the Mazdyasni Gatha and you'll realize what they did and why they did it. The Mazdyasni culture was based on truth, while the Greek culture was based on myth. The second example is Ha 44. The question in the Ha's are about creation, and the answer given by Zarathustra is kas na, repeated several times, which means no one. Even in modern Iranian languages, it means no one. But they have said that the S of the kas is silent, and the scribe dropped the R. So the word is kenar, which means which man. All this is the continuation of the cultural genocide started by Alexander. Read the Mazdyasni Gatha and you will see the difference. It is the first and only word-for-word translation and done by me. It is the thoughts of Zarathustra, not the thoughts of scholars. It is the Mazdyasni, not the Abrahamic Gathas. The Amazon link is on my website, ancientiran.com, and I will add it to the chat. Or you can just search for Mazdyasni Gatha on Amazon. Thank you all for listening. Tempton.
Okay, thank you for for a wonderful presentation. So, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open for questions or discussions. Yeah, Manik, go ahead, please. Manik, go ahead.
Thank you uh, for your wonderful presentation and for talking about, how much our